Now, this morning, governors returned to the Supreme Court seeking the court's intervention in unlocking the current impasse on the Division of Revenue Bill 2019. Governors have accused the National Treasury and the National Assembly of holding counties hostage. The county chief said the National Treasury has continuously been ignoring the Commission of Revenue Allocations, recommendations on the sharing of revenue between the national government and the developed units. Chief Justice David Maraga has given parties engaged in a lawsuit following the contentious Division of Revenue Bill up to Monday next week to file and serve papers before the Supreme Court. And we're now joined by our reporter Timothy Otieno, who has been pursuing this story for the better part of the day. Tim, good afternoon. It's great to see you. The governors and, their representatives, the lawyers, have until Monday next week. But tell us, what else did transpire in court today, Tim?
Well, Chief Justice David Maraga also mentioned that there would be a mention date on Tuesday, 9 a.m. at the Supreme Court after the filing of those papers the day before. And Maraga did advise the lawyers, or rather did give information to the lawyers, that the hearing of this particular case could begin as soon as Wednesday next week, because it had been applied and certified as a matter of urgency, because the funds needed by county governments to run their operations 19 days since the financial year began have remained elusive to them. But nonetheless, the situation that has led for these seeking of advisory from the apex court in the land has pitted the Senate versus the National Assembly in a push and pull over the Division of Revenue Bill that up to date is yet to be passed, despite the fact that the Appropriations Bill has been signed by the President and is now an act. Now, the appropriation bill is the legal legislation that allows and gives the green light for the use of funds that have been dispersed for both the national and county government, and is the basis of one of the reasons why the governors have gone to court, because they want the court to advise on how the appropriations bill, which is now an act, can take effect without the national and county governments agreeing on how much, first of all, they should share amongst themselves before this money can then be used for various activities. So the governors, led by the vice chair of the Council of Governors, Muranga Governor Mwangi Wairia, were in court today alongside the former chair of the Council of Governors, Josephat Nanok, leading a delegation of the governors to court this afternoon, listening to that particular case. But next week, Tuesday, is when that mention will be coming up before Chief Justice David Maraga. Interestingly, Grace, on Tuesday is the same day the National Assembly will be reconvening. They have been on a 2-week recess, and they will be reconvening, and they will be retabling the Division of Revenue Bill, which initially was 310 billion shillings. This retabling will see an increase of about 6.5 billion shillings. They'll be retabling a 316.5 billion shillings Division of Revenue Bill. This money, the National Assembly hopes, will be going to the counties, even as senators have promised to once again reject that bill, and the impasse continues, Grace.
I'm curious, because you actually did say that the Deputy Registrar, that is Daniel Ole Kewo, had actually certified the application as urgent, meaning these governors and their representatives did have their expectations, team. And although you've told us they'll be back in court on Tuesday, and today we are aware it was supposed to be a mention, but were you able to speak to them, or if not the governors themselves, their representatives, the lawyers, just to get, if their expectations were met following the session in court today, Tim?
Well, of course, because it's a matter that is before the apex court in the land, the Council of Governors did speak to the media, but they did not reveal much, only saying that they would then consolidate their legal team to present these papers by Monday 4 p.m. and they would all be gathering before the Supreme Court Tuesday morning to get directives on which way forward. But the governor's stance in this matter has never faltered since they began this legal battle, which took effect on Monday when they filed this advisory petition before the Supreme Court. The governors have basically been on the side of the senators as well as the Commission for Revenue Allocation, which had initially allocated 335 billion shillings to be set aside to the counties. The senators were also of this opinion. But the National Assembly and the National Treasury have been on this other side, instead advocating for 310 billion shillings. These two sides could not agree on what amount to be allocated to the counties. Then the mediation process kicked in. 4 members from the National Assembly and 4 members from the Senate tried to sit down to see if they could bring this impasse to an end. They could already cede ground. The senators ceded ground from 335 billion shillings, which they had initially wanted, ceded to 327 billion shillings. The National Assembly moved from its initial stance of 310 billion to 316.5 billion shillings. But there is a bone of contention of 11 billion shillings between 316 and 327 billion shillings, which is the bone of contentions, and senators and the members of the National Assembly could not agree on this amount. The window period for the mediation team to table a new bill in the National Assembly lapsed, and that bill failed on a technicality. So that is where we are, and this has forced the governors, through the chair of the Council of Governors, to move to court because counties are cash-strapped and a looming financial situation is imminent in the counties, which need to pay their staff, need to kickstart key development projects, as well as tender for procurement of different assets within the counties that still remains in limbo 19 days since the financial year began. So basically, as it is, Grace, so to speak, the government, both levels of government, are experiencing a shutdown. Although, Grace, the national government can kick in Article 222 of the Constitution that allows the national government to source and get funds from the consolidated fund 50% in case of such a situation. However, the Constitution remains tight-lipped on what happens to county governments if there is an impasse, even though the national government can now get its fund from the consolidated funds, 50% of it, Grace.
Well, in team, our reporter Timothy Otieno there, of course, updating us on what transpired at the Supreme Court today. And of course, he's told us that all parties were directed to file and serve papers at each other and before the Supreme Court by Monday 4 p.m. And they've also been directed to appear at 9 a.m. Tuesday for a mention on the same. Of course, this is in regard to the division of revenue bill ruling.